welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. Thanks to Maureen Petrie and to the Warner Library for hosting this. Many thanks to the Village Bookstore, which is providing copies of Miss Havilland with signed bookplates by Gay Daly. Okay, they also have a website from which you can order the book. I am Marilyn Johnson. I am a dear friend of Gay Daly's. Gay, 30 years ago, wrote a fantastic nonfiction book called Pre-Raphaelites in Love. A hot account, historical account, really a very much admired book about the pre-Raphaelite artists and the models and women who were part of their circle. Some of them they married, some of them they did not, but they might have if they had been from a different time. At any rate, it was a fantastic book. Gay has been writing, being a magazine writer and doing a million other things since then. And she has just come out with her first novel, Miss Havilland, in the middle of a pandemic. This is a novel that is set during World War I. and it is about a singular woman. There are many things that I admire about the book, which I have now read probably 3 or 4 times. And one of the things that I admire very much about it is that it is a novel about the Great War, told from a woman's point of view, in which the woman participates in the war and actually gets to the edge of the battle. As a writer, my hat is off to you, Gay, for figuring out how to do that. I also very much admire the fact that she has captured the times so well, and yet also her character gets to have good sex. This is really a terrific thing. One thing that is great about this novel is that it was inspired by a real person. And Gay, I'd love for you to tell us about the person who inspired the novel and how it came to you that you needed to write about her.
The person was my grandmother's, a first cousin of my grandmother, named Evelyn. We always called her cousin Evelyn. Everybody in my family who's watching will know that that was her name. She used to come to my grandmother's house every Sunday night, not many Sunday nights for dinner. We went every week. And we would have cocktails followed by dinner and Ed Sullivan. This is the 1950s, when Evelyn was a middle-aged woman. And I knew very few things. I could tell you in like 3 sentences almost everything I know about her life during World War I. But I know that she made extraordinary sacrifices for her family and did go to Washington to do military intelligence. And she was a brilliant mathematician. And when I was a little girl, I would just study her. She was also almost 6 feet tall and very commanding, formidable presence. And so I was a little girl and I would sit there in the corner and watch her and try to figure out, like, why is she so singular? She was the only woman in my family who had a job that involved intellectual challenge. And I wondered if I would be able to do something like that. And so many years later, I was walking down the hall in my house when my children were little, and I remembered some of those few things I knew about her and the war. And I thought, there's a whole movie there. I wrote it as a screenplay, and I spent 5 years researching World War I, just reading about it all the time. And then I tried to sell the screenplay. I came close a few times. Then, I ended up becoming a science journalist instead because, our life changed completely. And then a few years ago, actually the year I was 60, which is actually 9 years ago now, it's a long time. My husband said to me one day, you know, you've wanted to write a novel since you were a little girl, and you're not getting any younger. I think you really ought to like think about that. And the year you're 60 is like, I mean, you think 30 is hard, and then 40 is more difficult, and 50 is more difficult. And now I'm facing 70, it's terrifying. 60 was just like, so, but I thought, you know, he's really right. And I went back to the screenplay, which I had always thought I could probably write this as a novel. And I started working on it. And, you know, now I'm sitting here talking to you tonight because I finally finished it and it got published. And I am wearing, I'll take it off to show you, a bracelet that I got for Christmas when I was 13 years old. It's gold and real pearls. It's very beautiful. And when the last time I saw our cousin Evelyn, she was in her high 80s, and I went to meet her with my parents for lunch in San Francisco at the assisted living where she lived. And I, you know, went to sit down next to her, and I saw that she was wearing the same bracelet that she had given me. She had also bought one for herself. And it kind of felt like something came full circle in that moment. I was so touched. It meant so much to me, and it still does. Jewelry is very important, I think, symbolically to a lot of people, to a lot of women more. And so this is important. And if you read the book, or if you have read it, you know that a ring is very important in the book. And that was one of those things that I saw walking down that hall that day, was the story of the ring.
Very cool. Well, since you brought up your husband, there are many people who are on this call who will know that Gay was married to Jay Lovinger, who was a legendary editor. He was my editor. He edited some of the people who were on the call, and he edited Gay. And, you know, there were many of us who warmed our hands around his fire. And it's so cool that he was open and generous with you and encouraged you. And he would go through the book and sit down with you in a way that, I mean, this is a very delicate thing to do if you're a writer.
Marilyn's husband is also a brilliant editor. So we both understand this complex, delicate relationship.
I speak as someone who knows that it's very tricky, and writing is it's a very personal thing that you do, and it's also, believe it or not, really hard. And so when you make something, it's great. You feel like, oh my God, look what I created, look what I made. And then someone who is closer to you than anyone in the world says, oh no, this scene, make it go away. It's it can have an effect on a relationship. And you have to have, I think, a very strong relationship to trust somebody in the way that a writer trusts an editor, who helps them come to completion on something as ambitious as a historical novel.
That's true. I will tell a story that became like a sort of a shorthand between the two of us. That when we'd been married less than a year, and I was rewriting a chapter of my other book, Pre-Raphaelites in Love, and it was like about 100 pages typed. This is back when people were still typing, and I gave it to Jay on a Sunday afternoon. I said, I need you to read this now. He says, okay. And it was the first time we'd ever done a big thing like this. And so 2 hours later, he says, okay, I'm ready. And so I go in and I have a legal pad and pen. And I write down like 12 things that he tells me I need to do. And 4 of them are major, and I know he's right. It's going to be a tremendous amount of work. 6 of them are small, and I know how to do them. 2 of them I think are just wrong. So I go away and I'm washing the dishes, and another couple hours go by, and he comes into the kitchen and he says, do you remember that sentence in the chapter that goes blah, 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 blah? And I go, yeah. He says, that was a very good sentence.
Oh, bless his heart.
Yeah. Well, but this book would not exist if he had not stood behind me and encouraged me to write every single day from the day when I first met him in 1983. And he went over this book time and again, and we sat in the same living room where Marilyn and I are right now. And I read it at different times. I read it aloud to him, every single sentence, and vice versa. And another, a year after that, he read the whole thing to me, because that's a really good way to catch saggy sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you some idea of his commitment to that project.
Well, what a gift. I mean, to pay for that kind of service is really, well, you pay for it in other ways, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, we were in this very living room not long after Jay died, listening to an unbelievable parade of people remembering him. And, and that was just a few people. I mean, the world that he touched was much bigger than that. So he had been ill for a very long time. And his primary champion and caretaker and advocate and driver and nurse was yourself. So writing this novel was not just an act of vision and an act of faith, but it was also a real triumph because you fitted in between raising your daughters and caring for this brilliant man who happened to have a whole lot of medical baggage. Anyway, congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. One of the things that he really liked about the novel was how knowledgeable and gracefully included in the narrative were details about World War I, like chemical warfare. Jay really liked the chemical warfare part. I really liked the part about designing dresses and making dresses, which is, so I will say that somebody who writes a novel that embraces the world of chemical warfare and the world of dressmaking you have to research a tremendous amount, and you have to know as much as, not probably as much as the mathematicians who are the main characters in the novel, but you have to know enough math to fake it. Am I right?
Yes. It's fun. You know how when you're reporting a story, like there's a certain period there when you know everything about meteorites. I mean, more than some of the scientists you're talking to, because you're some problem about meteorites. I think that this is similar. It's like, I became really interested in a lot of things about military history that I had never known anything. I always thought military history, oh my God, And then I started reading it and I realized it was unbelievably interesting on every level, from, the fact that American, divisions were larger than French and British divisions, down to, when the Germans started to use chemical weapons, they used chlorine gas, but it smelled horrible. So then people, the Allies would realize, and they would back away. And so then they changed to a chemical called phosgene that smelled like sort of a dusty hay. It's just since the battlefields were farmlands, dusty hay in the air. So what? Then they realized, like, the wind would, if it was blowing in the wrong direction, it would blow into the faces of the German soldiers and hurt them. So that they learned to pack it into artillery shells and then drop them onto the other side and kill people. And then the most horrifying thing, I think, is that the Germans understood that killing a soldier sounds like an ultimate achievement, but in fact, it'd be much better to wound somebody. Because if you're wounded, you are, you're lying on the battlefield. People have to take the risk of going out to get you. So maybe you could shoot some other people. Then they have to be taken to the casualty clearing post, where someone has to do first aid. and then just, triage them to see whether they could walk back to the field hospital or do they need to be loaded into an ambulance. And there's a person at every stage, and a nurse has to take care of them, so that, and then they might have to go there further, anyway. The point is that many people are required to take care of a single wounded soldier.
So you understand something very important about war by understanding that one thing. And I will say one thing that I love about the literature of the Great War. First of all, there's fantastic literature about this war, but also we just finished, honoring the centenary of this war. It is within the memory of people that we knew. It is not that far away from either one of us. And this is, to me, this makes it both very strange and far away, and something that is viscerally connected to us and connected to the dark time that, I feel that we're living in. And I will say, you have another fantastic show and tell, which is the blue lace dress.
That's right. Oh, where did I put it? I'll get it. Did you put no, go ahead. Just keep talking.
Okay. Oh no, I'll get it. I'll get it because I'm closer to it.
Right.
Okay.
I'm up.
Now I've messed it up.
I'm not worried.
So Gay has the actual, for those who've read the book, there is an evening dress that this woman wears, and it becomes very significant to her. And this is the description of the dress in the novel is based on an actual dress. Now,
let's see how this works.
I hope you can. It is the most delicate lace.
Yeah. We can. Okay. I think I can see that, right? Can people see this? I'm assuming they can. I can't hear them, of course.
Yes, they're nodding. Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
It is physically like a little cobweb, but done as a kind. You cannot imagine that someone takes this on a ship across, basically pretty terrifying waters, and then uses it at multiple times in her life. It is the beautiful dress that she uses, and nobody, ripped it. And nobody.
I'm going to have to interrupt Marilyn here, because this is where there's a really interesting, and we just haven't had time to talk about this.
Yeah.
That was my cousin Evelyn's actual dress, and my mother saved it, and she gave it, I inherited it somehow. But the fictional Evelyn and the real Evelyn are very different. The real Evelyn went to Washington. The fictional goes to France. So, but still.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm even taking it to Washington. For now, if we had a dress that delicate, we would probably not even wear it.
Not even wear it. How you can't even imagine. You certainly wouldn't wear it to a club.
Right.
Or, no offense to, the people that we would end up dancing with, but can you even imagine?
It was definitely a ballroom dancing dress for, yes.
Okay,
gentlemen and ladies.
Here is a thing from real life that inspired the story that you used beautifully in the novel and described beautifully, and yet seeing the dress itself and knowing how old that was is pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, and to me too. I take it out every once in a while and just look at it. Yeah.
Well, so I inherited not that long ago a World War I. It's not actually a diary; it's a little notebook from my grandfather.
I know both of our grandfathers served in World War I.
Isn't that amazing? So this is a little notebook with his beautiful handwriting, writing these poems that he wrote while he was staying up late, in France. And he dated each one of them and put the name of the village that he was in. It is, I hold it in my hands and I think, how close I am to the horror of that war.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and speaking of which, this plexiglass, which I picked up
Mm-hmm.
just a couple hours ago from the Warner Library, from their kitty room. They use it while they're doing story time in their kitty room. The director, Maureen, told me that we were talking about how hard it was in the pandemic to walk around with masks on, and how hard it is to run a library. And she said, but then I think how awful the influenza of 1918 was. And 10 years later, this library was built. And this library, the Warner Library, for those of you who have not been there, is one of the beautiful old Carnegie libraries that is fabulous.
It has bronze doors, like or something out of a Renaissance cathedral, in Florence. I mean, it's unbelievable. Just the front doors, and they're just it's amazing.
And it has a room where there are treasures from local writers from the last 100 years. I mean, it's really a treasure itself. So anyway, that's my nod and salute to 100 years ago, but making 100 years ago come to life in a work of fiction that speaks to us right now, I think must be an incredible challenge.
It is. I think, both my books are from, one is the 19th century, and it kind of ends around World War I. And so I knew that next project I wanted to read and learn about World War I. But one of the things that you have to think about is, how did people actually speak?
How did they speak?
Like what would be formal diction now that would sound absurd might be too informal then. So you have to try to develop your ear, to by reading letters, by remembering talking to people from 2 generations before yourself, and just but I really love thinking about that. Like when I'm writing, I would often just keep tinkering with what is the voice here, what and what words are anachronistic. Like I was reading a book last week where a very old lady, they referred to her sibling, and I thought, at that time, the sibling is like a word of the 1960s, not the 1930s. It just sounded awful, and it took me 5 chapters to get over that and move on. So
if you're attuned to something, then hearing something spoken out of time. I'm trying to write something that is a little bit historical, but set in a more recent time. And I just came across Merriam-Webster said new words that entered the language in the year of your birth. This was how the viral
That's great.
thing was done. So I just went through it for the period that I was interested in. And it was fascinating how many words entered the language that you would have thought had come many years before or many years after. I mean, getting those things right. As another friend, a novelist, says, you put something out there these days, if there are mistakes in it, if you get things wrong, there are people who know a whole lot more than you, and they will let you know that you got it wrong. And
that's
definitely part
true.
of the challenge. It's so much fun. Well, do we have other questions? I don't know if Maureen.
Let's see. There's 5 things in the chat box.
Okay, well, you figure out how to do that, because I don't have access to it.
Okay, Esmeralda, gorgeous. So wonderful to see an object that recalls the time, place, and character, and that inspired the author. Oh, thank you, Esmeralda. The library is located in Tarrytown, New York, which is just south of me. I live in Sleepy Hollow, the real Sleepy Hollow. Marilyn lives north in Briarcliff Manor.
Oh, and just as just to put it in the context of our place and time, right now, this discussion, I had to come to Gaze very early because in spite of the pandemic, The traditional Halloween celebration around here begins at the beginning of October, and they are doing haunted hay rides and ghost tours and all kinds of things. And the traffic on the main road near Gay is bumper to bumper at this hour. So I had to make sure that I could get here and not be caught in Halloween traffic. Yeah, we're in Sleepy Hollow. It's pretty cool. The Headless Horseman actually would put in an appearance at my children's trick-or-treating venue. I mean, you know, the Headless Horseman, I mean, you can figure out how they did that, but how did they do that? Okay.
We should probably unmute this so people want to ask questions.
Oh, that could be chaotic.
Right.
I have another question. Let me ask another question and anticipate and pretend it comes from someone else. I referenced the great literature of World War I. Is there something, who are your literary models? Not necessarily World War I related, but what is to you a great novel? Who would you love to write like?
Well, I think actually what I would like to do is I just reread the second volume of Pat Barker's trilogy about World War I. And I just encourage anybody to try to read. The first one's called Regeneration. The second one is The Eye in the Door. And the third one is The Ghost Road. They're so good that it's really it's humbling.
Stunning books about, yes.
Marilyn?
Thank you.
There were 3 questions in the chat. One was, what was Gay's favorite part of the book? The second question was, are you planning to do a screenplay based on the book? And the third question was, what do your relatives think of the book?
Excellent questions.
They are.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to answer them in order. And the first one is from my niece, Kenzie. Hello, Kenzie. My favorite part of the story to write. Let me think about that for a second. What comes to my mind is the section about when Evelyn goes. I don't want to like give away the plot for people who haven't read it, so I'll try to be a little careful of not throwing spoilers out here. She goes to Boston for Christmas during World War I to visit the family of the man that she's in love with. And I loved creating the characters in that family, a New England family, Boston Brahmins. It's one of the funnier parts of the book, and I love being able. It's a very serious book in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of really painful, tragic things about the war that loom large, and those were very meaningful to me to write. But to write about the Bayards, Rose and Jedediah and Lily, and that was probably the most fun. Then the Headless Horseman. I've gotten like 5 different photos of the Headless Horseman from friends in text today. And Susie's question, are you going to try to sell the screenplay again now? The screenplay is completely different because it's much more romantic, and one of the 3 main characters who's in both is a pilot, and I think that I probably would write a different screenplay now because I guess I'm older, I'm more grown up in some ways, but I'd love to do it as a screenplay again, because it's easier for me to write a screenplay than to write a novel, because I felt like I could hear the characters speak very easily. So I could just sit down at my typewriter in the morning and hear what they were going to say. And um, hadn't known that, and I would love to do it again. And Jerry, how did other members of your family help you research the book? I asked I asked my Uncle George what he remembered. I was trying to find out what, if anybody in the family was still alive, knew what my cousin Evelyn had done in Washington in terms of military intelligence. He didn't actually know. And my sister Shelley and her husband Michael have done a lot of family genealogy, and they have been great answering questions. And so they're but I was the oldest grandchild, and I was like the only one sitting in that living room watching Ed Sullivan. My brother and my sister were much, they were younger, and I'm not sure they remember Cousin Evelyn the way I do. But I'd love to talk to them more about it now and see what they do remember.
Can I add something?
Mm-hmm, sure.
One of the poignant things that I learned when I was writing a book about obituary writers was that the children and grandchildren of people are mainly the ones who keep their stories alive and who are the ones who become sources for any obituaries that are written. And there are so many extraordinary single women who have appeared throughout history who, when they're gone, they don't necessarily have anyone who holds their story close and who is able to tell it in a way for someone who can write it up as a narrative for, the obituary page. And that to me is one of those poignant losses to the world.
It really is. And my cousin Evelyn, the actual person, did not marry and did not have children. And so in some ways, writing this book, most of it, 95% of it is imagined by me. I don't know what really happened, because she was a very reserved, self-possessed woman who didn't want anyone to feel sorry for her, even though she had made enormous sacrifices to take care of her parents. And it was now people think that women don't do that. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in the thoughts and the feelings of this.
You made a choice to tell a story that might not have been a story that would have happened. If that story would have had a different ending, I think if it had happened during World War II, for instance, or during Vietnam, I mean, it very possibly would have had a different. It's such a gift what you've done as a niece. I mean, I think that is a real. It's a real wonderful thing to bring a family story alive, even if it's 90% fiction. It still makes us, here we are all sitting around. I happen to know where some of these people are from. We're from a lot of different places, and we're all talking about Cousin Evelyn. So, I mean, light a candle for Cousin Evelyn, okay?
Though in a slightly different vein, I would say, like you said, well, in World War II, it might have been different. I don't know how entirely different it would be, because this is a woman who should have been a mathematician. And I don't want to give away too much, but she doesn't get her chance. And when in like 2000, I went to work at Discover magazine as an editor, and the second story I edited was about the first American high school age girl to be on the US Math Olympiad team to go to the International Math Olympiad. And she, I mean, it is not that easy for women to be mathematicians right now. I mean, there are some extraordinary ones who do incredible work, but it is still not a place where, I mean, in computer science is the same, where girls are not they're not encouraged to go into the computer lab when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, high school, and they're
Well, and they're, yes, and they're targets if they do, as we know from various scandals and Gamergates. Yeah, it's very tough still. Let's see if you have another question. I think you might need to scroll.
Yeah, let's see.
Oh, these are lovely. You're gonna.
I don't have a question, but want to thank you for the work you've done. My great-grandfather was in World War I. I have lived a life as a female, knowing my deep history of strong women coming from grandparents of this generation. Oh, that's really wonderful.
It's lovely.
And from Ryan, this is my nephew Ryan. How is the storytelling and pace of this new novel different from your last book?
Wow.
Storytelling and pace. They're so different that I think it would be really hard to compare them. Good question, though. I have to think about it. We can talk about that. What in the 20-odd years between books did you learn about storytelling that helped change and influence your writing? I'd say that's a great question. I'd say it was living with my husband and watching him and all of his writers, including Marilyn, create stories and struggle with how do you make a story great, and what's important, what kind of details, and every story is different. Each one, how do you each one is like a little treasure that has to be nurtured and brought to life. And watching them do that and studying how he helped them helped me to become a much better writer and editor. Let's see. From Bob Sullivan. Hello, Bob.
Hey, Sally. This is like a reunion from Life magazine,
yes.
among other things.
Yes. I cannot wait to chat soon enough about our World War I grandfathers. Mine taught grenade throwing, and my brother and I found a box of Papa's souvenirs in his attic one day. We had great fun till Mama called the fire department to come and confiscate our new toys. Bummer. Good. Well, Bob, I'm glad that you're here with us tonight, communicating and
both
not
hands. Yeah. Wow.
Okay, there's more. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you everybody for really hanging in with me here.
Engaged.
From Deborah to everyone. Yeah, Bob, my World War I. Okay, she has a husband named Bob, and we have Bob Sullivan, our friend, who's okay. So I think this is over to Bob, our friend, not the husband. My World War I widow cousin had grenades in her attic. Her daughter sold them in a yard sale until a sane neighbor called the army, which sent out a unit to blow them up. Deb, that is a great, great, great story. And, Sully is someone who will appreciate it. From Woo Lovinger to everyone, would you say you share Miss Havilland's sense of familial duty over all else?
What a question to come from your
daughter. Let me read the whole thing aloud, and then I'm going to go back and try to break it down. And as a younger generation, do you feel you've made improvements of that balancing act, taking care of your husband, family, and also being a writer, but maybe still feel held back as a woman in this world right now? Okay, these are 4 questions. I think we're going to take them one at a time. Would you say you share Miss Havilland's sense of familial duty over all else? Yes, I do. And I really appreciate that my daughter noticed that and was kind enough to ask. This really, really means a lot to me. And as a younger generation, do you feel you've made improvements of that balancing act? Yes, I think I was able to, because Jay, your dad, helps me to do that. From the very before we even had children, he made it clear that my writing would always be a big priority in our lives, and I didn't have to feel like I was the little woman who, needed to cook dinner or whatever. I also think that you and your sister took a lot of responsibility, and gave me time to write in ways that you probably don't even know. And I wanted to model for you a better balance than previous generations of women in our family, if I could. And I hope that sometimes I succeeded at that. Taking care of your husband and family and also being a writer. Definitely, it shifted a lot, partly because my husband had 3 chronic illnesses. And so sometimes there would be crises where everybody, all 4 of us, had to pull together, and writing had to be put to one side. But I also know that all 3 of you really supported me and wanted me to be able to be as good a writer as I could be, but maybe still feel held back as a woman in this world right now. Of course, I think any woman who does not realize that women are still held back in this world right now is, well, yeah, I'm sure there are some people who don't feel that, but they're not, observing carefully what actually happens in the world. And one thing that I've talked with you, Wu, and with your sister Wendy about is that women of my generation, like when I went to college, women were just starting to go to medical school and law school, for instance, in large numbers.
Wait, you were in the first class
That's true.
at Yale, right?
Yes. But still, I mean, no matter whether you went to, any college, it was not that women were not just having a professional life or being a writer, a journalist was still, now it's, people sort of sometimes take it for granted, like things have really changed. And now, women really can do these things. And I just wanted my daughters to know what the history was, and to know that things are still changing, and we all still need to work hard. But it wasn't easy then, and it's not easy now. That's what I'm trying to say.
Challenging in different ways. But Gay was a women's pioneer. You were with the first co-ed class at Yale.
That is true.
Okay, I rest my case. Go ahead, resume, continue.
Right, and then I went to graduate school because I couldn't figure out how to get a job. That is a true fact. True fact. Well, thank you, everybody. You've been really generous with your time and your enthusiasm for my book. And if you know somebody who might want to read the book and you want to suggest it to them, that would just be really, really a great thing to do. And I want to take a minute here to thank someone who's listening, which is my publisher, Michael Sager. There would be no book if he had not taken the leap. I'm even going to go back a little farther and embarrass Jerry Hershey by mentioning that she said, I think you should call Michael. Because I had tried, to sell my book through my really great agent, and it wasn't happening. And I called Michael, and we talked for like an hour. And basically, at the end, he said, "You're Jay Levenger's wife. It's probably a good book. I'll do it." And he is really always been in my corner, and he has knocked himself out, spending unbelievable number of hours, working on this book and helping me learn how to like promote it. I mean, Marilyn asked me to do this Zoom with her months ago, and I was like, oh no, I'm too nervous. And she was patient, and he was patient, and they encouraged me, and we're all here tonight talking. And I just appreciate Marilyn's incredible efforts and Mike's. So,
Mike, thank you. There are other people, I think, on this Zoom call who have also been published by Mike Sager. And
yes, Mrs.
Jan,
Hershey.
we welcome you.
Jan Cherubin, Orphan's Daughter, fabulous book.
Yep. We're very lucky. This has been a wonderful authors talk. Thank you to the Warner Library. Thank you to the Village Bookstore. And Gay, you are now ready to have book talks with book clubs.
That's true. I've done a couple of Zooms with book clubs, and it's really fun for me, and I'm happy to do it.
And look, now she knows how to do the Zoom, okay?
That's true.
Great. Thank you very much, Marilyn, and thank you, Gay.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, everybody.
Great interview. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Gay.
Thank you.